Hello guys, my name is Agata, I'm MCVP peer, so I'm responsible for public relations, and today I will have with you a session about delivery methods and global learning environments. This session is included into the agenda of Train the Trainers, which is supposed to prepare you for delivering all the conferences, LCMs and different touch points with your members. So let's first try to answer the question why we are talking about delivery methods and learning environments. Well, the thing is that, especially nowadays in our current situation, the way you present your content sometimes is as important as the content itself. Especially it is true for millennials who pay a lot of attention into how the things are presented to them, whether they are interesting or less interesting, and they value their opinion based on this. And of course, they also remember better the things that were presented in a more interesting way. Even if you think about your experience and reflect on different sessions that you've attended, for sure you've attended sessions that were for some reason extraordinary and spectacular, and you probably remember these sessions better than the more, let's say, boring ones that you might not remember very, very well. So our goal is, of course, to create an extraordinary session that people will remember very well. So how we can actually do it? How to choose the right method to deliver the session? Well, first of all, you should define the purpose of your session. So think, what is the goal, what you want to achieve thanks to this session? And to do this, we'll discover global learning environments. It is the concept that was developed by AI some time ago by ISEC International, and it shows different spaces in which members in ISEC can develop and acquire new knowledge. So, as you can see, what is included in global learning environments are team experiences. In a team experience, members require some new knowledge, they learn new stuff, they develop and grow. There are also conferences and seminars, which is, I think, like the most obvious example how people can learn and gain new knowledge in ISEC. We also have virtual spaces, so it includes all the webinars that you prepare for your members, maybe different online tests and so on. There are also learning circles, which are the circles of members who just share their experience between each other, and they might also reach some conclusion and gain some new knowledge or expertise. There are also one-to-one meetings or mentoring when you sit with your member and discuss something in this meeting, and you also can give some knowledge to your member. And the last environment is a self-reflection, when the members simply reflect on their own, and they might reach some conclusion about their journey, or they also might require new knowledge thanks to this reflection. So these are all the environments that our members live in their journeys that make them learn. And of course, speaking about the conferences and different touchpoints that you might have with your members, we'll focus the most on the second element, which is conferences and seminars. And the rest of the methods and different tips and tricks that I will show you are definitely to be used for the conferences and seminars, which also includes, for example, LCMs. So let's try to answer now the question, what to deliver to make it actually count, and how to choose the right delivery method for your session. So you know that we'll be focusing on the conferences and seminars, so in the touch points when you deal with like a group of people, but what kind of delivery methods we can actually use. So here I prepared for you a small group of different delivery methods that you might get inspired from. We have here games, discussions, reflection, case study, role-play, simulation, storytelling, and learning island. Let me explain to you each of them very shortly. Games are all the simply games and playful activities that you can do during your session. So different things engaging, running, changing places. It usually involves people moving around and so on. It's all about games. Then we have discussions when you try to create a kind of maybe a debate, or maybe just you try to get people share their opinions on a different subject. The third point is a reflection, when people just sit and reflect on something that happened and try to reach the conclusion on their own. The fourth thing is the case study, when you give them a description of a certain situation that happened, or maybe a certain place or a person, and they need to evaluate it somehow, maybe try to find a solution and so on. So they work on something that actually happened, and they try to reach something new with it. The fourth point is a role play, when you assign people different roles. So they might play a role of someone that they are actually not. Maybe a boss of a huge company, or maybe maybe a pregnant woman, or maybe even an animal or a plant or an astronaut and so on. So you can play with it as much as you want, and you usually give them a scenario of the things that they should say or do. The sixth thing is a simulation. So in the simulation, it's definitely more realistic than a role play. So here people also take a role, but a more probable and possible role. So for example, you can make a simulation of a general assembly. You can make a simulation of a customer flow. Or maybe if you want to go further, you can make a simulation of how United Nations work. But it's all something that can actually happen and is not quite far away from our ISEC reality. The seventh point is the storytelling, in which you just share a personal story or a perspective on something. And the last point are the learning islands, in which people just have an opportunity to move from one island or a place in which they learn something to another island or a place that they learn something else. So for example, when you see fuzzies sitting in different places in the room, or maybe a flip charts in different places of the room, and a small group of people moving from one fuzzy or one flip chart to another, this is exactly learning island, when people move from one point to another and they are learning different things. So probably by now, just to clarify it, you might not understand the difference between a roleplay and a simulation. So once more, to have it very clear, roleplay is something a little bit more crazy. It's something that will probably not happen when you pretend to be a person that you are not, you will never be, or maybe the person doesn't even exist. While a simulation is something based on our current reality that is not very, very far away from what we do in ISEC. And again, the learning islands are these activities involving the distribution of the learning materials, like for example flip charts or different things around the room, and people just move from one to another to acquire new knowledge. Now let's focus on the pros and cons of each of these methods. So as you can see, let's start with the games. What games are good for? Well, they definitely bring the energy to the plenary. The audience can learn in an unexpected and funny way. They are definitely engaging. And the audience also can learn different things from one game. Like you can have different messages or a very strong message from one simple game. What is dangerous about the games is that we risk a lot of chaos happening if we don't prepare the games very well. Games also take usually a lot of time and preparation, and even in the session, you might waste a little bit of time on them. They also might be not aligned with the session, or at least our audience, our delegates, might not see the connection between the game and the session. And they are also sometimes not very funny if we don't have a reward for people. So it's an input for you that maybe if you make a competition, you can reward people in the simplest way with an applause, like clapping, or maybe with a candy or something sweet, like to give any kind of reward for the effort. Another method is the discussion. When it comes to discussion, what is good is definitely that it gets more thoughts from the plenary, so people can actually think about their own opinion. It enables audience to take active role in the learning process, and it also gives the fuzzy feedback on the session. Why? Simply because if people participate in the discussion, if you ask them to share and they actually share and give you their opinion, you know that the session is engaging. What is not very good about the discussion is that it needs fuzzy to supervise and direct the discussion. So you can't just leave the discussion to unfold, because it might go very far away from the main subject. So you need to be very attentive and on point while checking what people are actually talking about. Now we have a reflection. What is the huge advantage of reflection? It's that it facilitates audience to have their individual space. So people sometimes need simply space to digest and think about the experience without sharing it with anyone. Like, there's a couple of minutes for their own selves. They are also quite memorable, especially when you choose the right questions for the reflection, or when reflection happens after a very powerful moment. It's something that your delegates will remember for a long time. What is not very good about the reflection is that it can turn very easily into a sleepy session when the time is bad, or when your people are tired. The mood might get very low. And it's also sometimes a little bit confusing if we don't choose the topics for the reflection very, very carefully, and people are a little bit lost on what they should reflect on. The next method is the case study. So what is good about the case study is that it applies theoretical knowledge to a real life scenario. So people use the knowledge that they already have into the situation that happened or could possibly happen and try to solve it. They also stimulate audience to find out more after the session. If they get interested in a subject, they might actually research on their own. What is dangerous about case study is that it needs strict time management, because people sometimes spend a lot of time discussing very tiny details from the case study. So you would need to get really involved into checking how the work is actually progressing. And if there is a lack of knowledge in the audience, if your delegates do not know how to solve the case study, it might not be helpful and it might turn out to be very confusing for your people. When it comes to the role play, it definitely brings energy to the plenary, simply because usually it's funny and it requires from people a lot of creativity. It also enables you to have more involvement from the audience, simply because they need to perform something and come to the stage. And if it's done right, it also shows the relevance of the topic. On the other hand, what is not good about the role play is that it might be potentially not relevant if you choose the wrong subject, if people didn't understand the task. Also, the challenge is in ensuring full participation from the audience, because you might have delegates who will not want to participate in a role play, who are shy or maybe bored or tired. And also, you might have delegates who want to participate, but the other half, that is the audience, might not be interested in the role play. When it comes to the simulation, what is very good is that it enables you to put a theory into a real practice. So if you want to make a simulation of a customer flow in ISEC, and your delegates already know the theory of a customer flow, they can actually dry run it, let's say, in practice. Thanks to this, you are able to see if the audience understands the session or not. And it also enables a very dynamic learning experience, because you can check if you understand the things on point. What is a little bit disadvantageous about simulation is that it's time consuming. It takes time to explain the simulation to people, to actually do the simulation, and then to debrief it and to reach a conclusion. You also need to consider every single factor to execute it in a proper way, because there are different things, like, for example, logistics, that might be challenging when it comes to simulation, especially if people need laptops or moving around the room and so on. When it comes to the storytelling, what is good about it is that it definitely helps you to get original thought and feeling of the audience. It also connects the ideas, making the session more dynamic and unique. If you have a person sharing their own personal story or their own perspective, it makes the session definitely more special, and it's also easier for the FASI to connect with the audience, especially if you share something, if you have something in common. What is dangerous, let's say, about storytelling is that you can never fully predict the feeling of the audience. They might find the story very interesting and they might identify themselves with the story, or something totally opposite. It can be potentially boring if the person that is sharing is not a good storyteller. Storytelling is not just telling about the things that happened to you in the past. It's about building the tension, making people interested in the story, reaching a conclusion, and so on. So it's something that definitely needs to be very well prepared. And it also needs to create a safe environment for people to maybe to share after your story, and also for you as a FASI to feel comfortable actually sharing the story. So it usually requires the audience that you can trust. And for the last method, which are the delivery islands, what is very good is that they are dynamic and memorable. Dynamic simply because when you move people around the room and you ask them to go to different places, they are dynamic, and thanks to this, they remember the session better. It's also nice because it has many sections to explain different things. So if you have, for example, separate stages of customer flow, or maybe a couple of totally different stories from different phases, it's a good idea because people can associate a place with a knowledge that they require. And it's also customized for the audience when it comes to the number of people that speak and the number of places that they visit and so on. What is more challenging is that learning islands needs a lot of resources, especially in terms of people, if you want different faces to share their things in different places, and it also needs preparation. Even if it doesn't need faces, maybe it needs flip charts to be prepared or videos or something like this. And you also cannot really control what happens in every island simply because you are just one fussy and you ask other people to share something, or maybe you can never also predict how much time it will take for a group of people to move from one island to another, how much time they will spend asking questions after a presentation in a given island, and so on. So it's a little bit unpredictable, and it requires a lot of attention to see how each group is progressing. So for the end, I would like to leave you with the simple message that I've seen one that says wrong vehicle doesn't take you anywhere. And connecting it to the delivery methods, it simply means that if you choose a wrong method to deliver your session, it will not take you anywhere. You need to choose a proper method to deliver your message. So remember what is your purpose and what is your goal of the session, what you actually want to deliver, and what effect you want your session to have on the people, and then try to choose the right delivery method. Remember what kind of mood and what kind of dynamism each method brings. Remember which one is more playful, which one is more reflective, which one is good for the sessions in which you deliver knowledge, which one is better for the sessions in which you want people to feel more and reflect on their experience, and so on. And then try to shape your session in the best way possible. Remember that you always start with why you are making the session and your goal of the session, and then you choose the method, not the other way around. So thank you so much, guys. If you have any questions, you can always find me in Workplace, and I wish you amazing touch points with your members.